The sky above Kethfor burned orange and red as another explosion lit up the horizon. And Sergeant Marcus Cole pressed his back against the crumbling wall of what had once been a schoolhouse. His rifle clutched tight against his chest as the ground shook. Beneath his boots, 3 years of war with the Verkith had turned him into something harder than he ever wanted to be. And he had seen friends die screaming in the darkness of space, had watched entire colonies burn to ash, had learned to hate the scaled monsters who seemed to exist only for slaughter. His squad was scattered across the ruined colony, hunting for survivors, though everyone knew there would be none, because the Verkith never left survivors. And that was simply the way of things in this brutal conflict. Marcus moved through the smoke and debris with practiced caution, his helmet display flickering with static from the interference caused by burning plasma conduits. And the air tasted like copper and death, even through his filtration system. He almost missed it, a sound so small and weak that it barely registered above the crackling of flames and the distant thunder of artillery. And at first Marcus thought it was just the wind howling through broken windows, but then he heard it again, a cry. Soft and pitiful and unmistakably alive, his training screamed at him to ignore it, to keep moving, to focus on the mission and get back to the extraction point before the Verkiths returned to finish what they had started. But something in that tiny sound made him stop. He followed it through the wreckage of a civilian transport, a vessel that had been trying to flee when the attack came. And the bodies of the crew were scattered across the cargo bay in positions that spoke of violent and sudden death. The cry came from beneath a collapsed support beam, hidden in a pocket of shadow where the flames had not yet reached. And Marcus knelt down and pushed aside the debris with hands that suddenly felt clumsy and uncertain. What he found made his blood run cold. A Verkith cub stared up at him with eyes like molten gold, its small body covered in scales that had not yet hardened into the armor-like hide of an adult. And it was so young that it still had the soft features that all infant creatures seem to share regardless of species. It was wounded and weak and terrified. And it looked at Marcus the way any child would look at a stranger in a moment of absolute helplessness. He should kill it. The thought came automatically. A product of 3 years of warfare and propaganda and grief for everyone he had lost to the Verkith's claws. And his hand moved toward his sidearm with the mechanical precision of a soldier following orders. But the cub made that sound again, that small and broken cry. And it reached out toward him with tiny clawed hands that could not yet hurt anyone. Marcus froze. He thought about his sister's children, back on Earth, about the way they would run to him whenever he visited, about the trust that young things placed in adults simply because they had no other choice. He thought about what kind of man he would become if he killed a baby because of the sins of its people. The cub whimpered and pressed itself against the cold metal floor, too weak to even try to escape. And Marcus made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He picked it up. The cub weighed almost nothing in his arms, and it was burning with fever and trembling with cold at the same time. And when he held it against his chest, it stopped crying and just looked at him with those enormous golden eyes. "What are you doing?" Private Santos hissed from the doorway, her rifle aimed at the bundle in his arms. And her voice carried the sharp edge of someone who had seen too many friends die at Verkith hands. Marcus did not answer right away, because he was not entirely sure himself. But when he spoke, his voice was steady and calm. "She is just a baby. She is the enemy, Sergeant. And if you bring that thing back to base, they will execute you for treason. Then I will not bring her back to base." The extraction shuttle arrived 20 minutes later, and Marcus told his squad that he had found nothing in the wreckage. And no one questioned him because they were all too tired and too eager to leave this burning hell behind. He smuggled the cub onto the shuttle inside his equipment bag, and every time she made a sound he coughed to cover it. And his heart pounded so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. The military doctors who examined him after the mission noticed nothing unusual, and his commanding officer accepted his report without suspicion. And Marcus used his combat pay to book passage on a civilian freighter, heading for the outer colonies. It took 3 months for them to catch him. Military investigators tracked him to a small station on the edge of known space, and they arrested him in front of a crowd of onlookers who watched with confused expressions as soldiers dragged away a man clutching a strange alien creature. The court-martial was brief and brutal, and the prosecution called him a traitor and a fool and a danger to humanity. And his defense attorney barely spoke because there was nothing to say. Marcus Cole was found guilty of desertion and collaboration with the enemy, and he was stripped of his rank and dishonorably discharged. And the news feeds across human space called him a monster who loved beasts more than his own kind. But the Verkith cub was not classified as a prisoner of war or a valuable intelligence asset, because no one wanted to admit that such a thing existed. And so she was simply released into his custody as an afterthought. The Verkith Dominion issued a statement calling the entire incident human propaganda designed to make the Dominion appear weak, and they denied that any cub had been lost or rescued. And that was the end of official interest in the matter. Marcus took the cub to the furthest corner of civilized space, to a station where people minded their own business and asked no questions. And he named her Kira because it meant light in an old Earth language he barely remembered. He had lost everything that mattered to him as a soldier, his career and his honor and his place among his own people. But when Kira wrapped her small clawed hand around his finger and made a sound that might have been laughter, Marcus decided that some things were worth more than everything. 15 years had passed since that burning night on Kethfor, and Marcus Cole had grown old in ways that had nothing to do with the gray in his hair or the lines on his face, because raising a Verkith child in a galaxy that hated both of them had aged his soul more than his body. Kira stood 7 feet tall now, her scales the deep purple of a twilight sky, and her claws could cut through starship hull plating without effort. But when she looked at Marcus, her golden eyes held the same gentle warmth they had shown since she was small enough to fit in his arms. She called him father in the human tongue, because he had never taught her the Verkith word for it. And she had learned human poetry and human music and human stories about heroes who did the right thing, even when it cost them everything. They worked as salvagers on the outer rim, picking through the wreckage of old battlefields and abandoned stations, selling what they found to merchants who did not care where it came from as long as the price was right. It was honest work, or close enough, and it kept them fed and their ship running. And that was all that mattered in the hard years after Marcus lost everything. But the galaxy never let them forget what they were on human stations. The dock workers would spit at Marcus and call him beast lover and traitor, and children would throw rocks at Kira while their parents watched and laughed. And shopkeepers would refuse to sell them supplies until they had no other choice. Among the Verkith, it was even worse, because her own kind saw Kira as something broken and shameful, a creature raised by prey who had forgotten what it meant to be a predator. A Verkith trader once cornered her in a cargo bay and called her a mewling soft-blood, said that she was a disgrace to her scales, said that she should have died on Kethfor with the rest of the week. And Kira had stood there and taken every word, because Marcus had taught her that violence was the last resort of those who had run out of ideas. The other species of the galaxy were no kinder, because they saw humanity as emotional and irrational, too soft to be trusted with real power. And the sight of a human raising a Verkith was proof of everything they believed about these strange apes from a small blue world. Marcus and Kira learned to move through the galaxy like ghosts, staying nowhere long enough to make enemies, trusting no one except each other. But sometimes the galaxy forced them to stand and be seen. The Meridian Trading Hub was the largest commercial station in the sector, a place where representatives from 100 species came to make deals and forge alliances. And Marcus needed to sell a cargo of rare minerals he had salvaged from a dead asteroid mine. He did not want to bring Kira, but she refused to let him go alone, because she worried about him constantly now that he was getting older and slower and more forgetful. They were in the main market plaza. When the Sindari ambassador noticed them, the Sindari were tall and elegant beings with skin like polished silver and eyes like chips of ice. And they considered themselves the most civilized species in the galaxy. And their ambassador was a creature named Velith, who had made a career out of humiliating those he considered beneath him. Well, Velith announced in a voice loud enough for the entire plaza to hear. "What have we here?" The crowd parted around Marcus and Kira, and suddenly they were standing alone in a circle of staring faces. And Marcus felt his old soldier instincts telling him to run, even as he forced himself to stand straight. A human and his pet. Velith continued, walking toward them with the casual grace of a predator who knew it faced no threat. "I had heard stories, but I never believed them until now." Laughter rippled through the assembled delegates, because the Sindari were powerful, and it was always wise to laugh at the jokes of the powerful. "Tell me, human," Velith said, stopping just in front of Marcus and looking down at him with an expression of theatrical curiosity. "Do you keep it on a leash, or does it roam free?" More laughter. Louder this time, Kira's claws dug into her own palms, hard enough to draw blood. And Marcus could see the purple liquid dripping between her fingers. But she did not move or speak, because he had taught her that dignity came from how you handled cruelty, rather than how you returned it. "We are just passing through," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. "We want no trouble." "Of course you do not," Velith said, turning to address the crowd with a showman's flourish. "Because trouble would require courage. And we all know humans have none of that." The ambassador gestured at Kira with one long silver finger. "Look at this creature. Raised by prey, taught to be weak, a zookeeper's fantasy made flesh." The plaza erupted in laughter. And even species who had no quarrel with humans or Verkith joined in, because the moment demanded it. And Marcus felt something break inside him that he had been holding together for 15 years, but he did not fight, because fighting would prove them right. And so he simply took Kira's bleeding hand in his own and led her out of the plaza, while the laughter followed them like a living thing. They did not speak until they were back on their ship. And when the airlock sealed behind them, Kira finally let the tears fall from her golden eyes. "Why do they hate us so much?" she asked in a voice that sounded far too young for such an ancient question. Marcus pulled her into a hug that he had to reach up for now, because she was so much taller than him. And he held her the way he had held her on that burning night 15 years ago. "They hate us because we scare them," he said softly. "They look at us and see something they cannot understand, and that frightens them more than any weapon. But we have done nothing wrong. No, we have not. And someday the galaxy will understand that." He did not know if he believed his own words, but he knew that Kira needed to believe them. And that was enough for now. They left the Meridian trading hub with their cargo unsold and their dignity in tatters. And the news feeds picked up the story and spread it across the galaxy as entertainment. And for a few days, everyone laughed at the beast lover and his pathetic pet. But laughter has a way of turning to silence. And silence has a way of turning to something else entirely. And the galaxy did not yet understand what it had set in motion on that day in the plaza. The message came through encrypted channels that should have been impossible to reach their small salvage ship. And when Kira saw the seal of the Verkith Dominion on the transmission, she nearly deleted it without reading, but something made her stop. Some instinct buried deep in her blood to recognize the importance of what she held. And when she opened the message, her world shattered into 1,000 pieces. Her mother was dying, not the human man who had raised her and loved her and taught her everything she knew about kindness, but the Verkith female who had given birth to her 20 years ago on a world she had never seen. Marcus found her staring at the message with tears streaming down her face, and he read it over her shoulder and said nothing for a long time. "You should go," he finally said. His voice heavy with something that might have been grief or might have been acceptance. "I will not leave you, Kira. This is your mother. You are my father, the only parent I have ever known. And I will not abandon you to chase the ghost of someone who abandoned me." But the messages kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. And finally, Marcus convinced her that she needed to see this woman at least once before it was too late. They traveled together to the Verkith homeworld, a journey that took them through hostile space and past military checkpoints that should have stopped them. But somehow every door opened and every guard looked the other way. When they landed on the surface, Kira understood why. The dying female was not just any Verkith. She was the former matriarch of the most powerful clan in the Dominion, and she had been watching over her lost daughter from the shadows for 15 years. Her name was Desara, and she lay in a medical chamber surrounded by the finest healers in the Empire. But their skills could not stop the disease that was consuming her from within. "My child," Desara whispered when Kira entered the room. Her golden eyes, so like her daughter's, filled with tears. "You came." Kira did not know what to say, because this stranger was everything she had tried not to think about for her entire life. And seeing her now brought up feelings she had buried so deep she had forgotten they existed. "Why?" Kira finally asked, her voice harsh with emotion. "Why did you leave me on Kethfor?" "I did not leave you. I lost you," Desara said, and her voice cracked with ancient pain. "The attack came without warning, and my ship was destroyed before I could reach you. And when I finally returned to search for you, you were gone, so you knew I was alive. I knew everything. I watched you grow up through agents I had placed on every station you visited. I saw the human raise you with more love than I could have ever given. And I was too ashamed of my failure to reveal myself." Marcus stood in the doorway, uncertain whether he should enter or leave. But Desara called out to him, "Come here, human. Come and stand beside your daughter." He walked to Kira's side, and Desara looked at him with an expression that held no hatred or contempt. "Only gratitude. You saved my child when I could not," she said. "You gave her everything I should have given, and you asked for nothing in return." "She is my daughter," Marcus said simply. "That is all the reward I ever needed," Desara smiled. And it was strange to see that expression on a Verkith face, because her people were not known for such gentle things, and that is why I'm giving her everything. She reached out with a trembling claw and touched Kira's hand. "You are the last legitimate heir to my bloodline. And when I die, the throne of the Dominion will pass to you." Kira felt the floor shift beneath her feet, and for a moment she could not breathe, because this was not possible. "This could not be real. I am an outcast," she said, "raised by humans, mocked by my own kind. No one would follow me. They will follow you because you are stronger than they know," Desara said. "You have survived everything the galaxy has thrown at you, and you have not broken. And that is the mark of a true ruler." Marcus said nothing, because this was not his decision to make. But when Kira looked at him, he saw fear in his eyes that had nothing to do with Verkith politics. He was afraid of losing her. "Whatever you choose," he said quietly, "I will support you." Kira looked at the dying matriarch who had given her life, and then at the aging human who had given her everything else. And she made the choice that would reshape the galaxy. "I will take the throne," she said. "But I will rule differently than those who came before." Desara closed her eyes and smiled. And 3 days later she was dead. The coronation was the most controversial event in Verkith history. because Kira insisted that Marcus stand beside her as she accepted the crown. And the sight of a human at the heart of their most sacred ceremony drove half the clans to open rebellion. The Civil War lasted 2 years, and it was brutal and bloody and terrible. But Kira fought not with the savagery her people expected, but with the cunning and compassion her father had taught her. She won battles not by slaughtering her enemies, but by outmaneuvering them, by cutting their supply lines and isolating their forces, by showing mercy to those who surrendered and justice to those who committed atrocities. And when the final rebel clan knelt before her throne, she did something that no Virkith ruler had ever done. She pardoned them. The galaxy watched in amusement as the soft matriarch spared those who had tried to kill her. And the Sindari ambassador, who had humiliated her in the trading plaza, gave interviews, calling her a weak ruler who would not last a decade. But Marcus saw something different in his daughter's eyes. Something that looked like patience, like the calm before a storm that no one else could see coming. "They think you are weak," he told her one night as they stood on the balcony of the Imperial Palace. "Let them think what they want," Kira replied, and her voice held an edge that had not been there before. "The galaxy will learn the truth soon enough." The Galactic Council had ruled known space for 3,000 years, and in all that time, they had never faced a threat they could not buy or bully into submission. And so when they looked at the new Virkith matriarch, they saw only opportunity. Kira's rise to power had destabilized the Dominion, and the great powers of the galaxy circled like predators sensing wounded prey, each one eager to take advantage of her perceived weakness. The Sindari ambassador Valeth led the coalition of species that sought to undermine her rule, and he worked with the cold efficiency of someone who had spent his entire life destroying those he considered inferior. First came the sanctions, economic restrictions that choked off trade routes and starved Virkith colonies of essential supplies. And when Kira protested to the council, she was told that these were necessary measures to ensure galactic stability. Then came the propaganda. News feeds across 1,000 worlds spreading stories about the puppet matriarch who was controlled by her human handler, who had abandoned her people's traditions to become something weak and pathetic. And then came the insurgents. Rebel groups that should have been crushed in the Civil War suddenly had new weapons and new funding. And they struck at civilian targets with a precision that could only come from outside intelligence. Kira knew who was responsible, because the evidence pointed clearly at the Sindari and their allies. But when she brought this evidence to the Galactic Council, they dismissed it as paranoid delusion. The Virkith have always blamed others for their problems, Veleth said smoothly, his silver skin gleaming under the chamber lights. Perhaps if the matriarch spent less time with her pet human and more time governing her people, she would not face such difficulties. The chamber erupted in the same laughter Kira had heard in the trading plaza all those years ago, and she felt the old rage building inside her like a fire that had been banked too long. But Marcus placed a hand on her arm, the same steady touch that had calmed her since childhood, and she forced herself to breathe. "We will find another way," he said quietly as they left the chamber. They did not find another way the diplomatic. Summit on Nexus Station was supposed to be a chance for reconciliation, a gathering of all the major powers to discuss the future of the galaxy. And Kira attended because Marcus convinced her that dialogue was always worth attempting. She was in the middle of a speech about cooperation and mutual respect when the assassin struck. The Sindari agent moved with the speed of someone who had trained their entire life for a single moment, and the blade in his hand gleamed with a poison that could kill a Virkith in seconds. Kira saw the attack coming, but she could not move fast enough. And in that frozen instant, she understood that she was about to die. But Marcus was faster. He stepped in front of her without thinking, without hesitating, the way he had stepped in front of countless dangers throughout her life. And the blade meant for her heart found his instead. The assassin's poison burned through his body as Kira's guards dragged the attacker away, and Marcus crumpled to the floor with blood spreading across his chest like a dark flower. "Father!" Kira screamed. And the sound was not the voice of a matriarch, but of a child watching her world collapse. The medics came quickly, and they worked with desperate efficiency. And somehow Marcus survived because humans were stubborn creatures who refused to die when they were supposed to. But it was close, so terribly close. And for 3 days, Kira sat beside his bed and held his hand and prayed to gods. She did not believe in when Marcus finally opened his eyes and saw her there. He smiled weakly and said, "Did we win?" Kira could not answer, because her throat was closed with emotion. And she simply held him tighter. The Galactic Council issued a statement expressing regret for the unfortunate incident and promising a thorough investigation. But everyone knew the investigation would find nothing, because the Council had never punished those who attacked species they considered unimportant. Velith gave an interview, calling the assassination attempt a tragic consequence of Verkith instability, and suggesting that perhaps a more suitable ruler should be found. He was still laughing when Kira requested an emergency session of the Council. She walked into the chamber alone, without guards or advisors, and she stood before the assembled delegates of 100 worlds with her father's blood still staining her scales. "You mocked him for saving me," she said, and her voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the vast room. "You called his compassion weakness. You laughed at our bond as if love were a defect." The delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, because there was something in her eyes they had never seen before. "And now you have tried to murder him." Velith opened his mouth to respond, to offer some smooth diplomatic deflection, but Kira silenced him with a look that would have made a supernova seem dim. "My father taught me mercy," she continued. "He taught me that the measure of strength is not how much pain you can inflict, but how much you can endure. He taught me that hatred is a poison that destroys the one who carries it." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice held the weight of empires. "But he also taught me that mercy without strength is just another word for surrender." The chamber was silent now, so silent that the soft hum of the life support system sounded like thunder. "You will learn what Verka's strength looks like when it is no longer restrained by your contempt." She turned and walked out of the chamber, and the door sealed behind her with a sound like a coffin closing. Velith laughed nervously and made a joke about emotional primitives, and some of the delegates joined in. Because old habits die hard, they were still laughing when the first Verkith war fleet emerged from hyperspace in the Sindari home system. The galaxy had seen Verkith wars before, brutal campaigns of annihilation that left worlds burning and populations screaming. And so when Kira's fleets descended upon the Sindari, they expected the same savage destruction. They were wrong. The Verkith under Kira fought like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed, with a precision and restraint that seemed impossible for a species known only for blood and fury. Sindari warships were disabled rather than destroyed, their crews evacuated to neutral stations rather than slaughtered, their commanders captured rather than executed. And each victory was followed not by celebration but by offers of peace. The Sindari commanders did not know how to respond, because they had prepared for a monster and found something far more dangerous instead. They had found a strategist. Kira had learned the art of war from Marcus, who had learned it from the great human military thinkers of Earth. And she combined those lessons with the natural ferocity of her people to create something unprecedented. Her fleets did not strike at cities or civilians. They struck at infrastructure and supply lines and communication networks, cutting the Sindari off from their allies, piece by piece like a surgeon removing a cancer. When the Morthian collective sent ships to reinforce the Sindari, Kira's diplomats were already meeting with Morthian dissidents who had long resented their government's arrogance. And before the reinforcements could arrive, the collective was dealing with internal Rebellion, when the Aleth tried to impose new sanctions. Kira released evidence of their complicity in the assassination attempt. Recordings and documents that had been gathered over years by intelligence agents no one had known existed. And suddenly, the elegant Aleth were too busy defending themselves to attack anyone else. Marcus watched from the Imperial Palace, still recovering from his wounds, but growing stronger each day. And he marveled at the woman his daughter had become. She was not the frightened cub he had pulled from the wreckage on Kethfor. And she was not the gentle girl who had cried in his arms after being mocked in the trading plaza. She was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. A ruler who wielded mercy as a weapon more devastating than any fleet. The Sundari capital fell without a single civilian casualty, because Kira's forces simply surrounded the planet and waited until the government agreed to surrender. And when Veleth was brought before her in chains, he still could not understand what had happened. "You should kill me," he said, his silver skin pale with fear. "That is what your kind does." Kira looked at him for a long moment, and then she smiled. "My kind, as you call us, does many things," she said. "But today, I am going to do something different. Today, I am going to let you live so that you can watch everything you built fall apart. So that you can see the galaxy you shaped, learn to respect those you taught them to hate." Veleth was exiled to a small moon on the edge of known space, where he would spend the rest of his life watching news feeds about the New Order. He had accidentally helped create the war, ended in 2 years. And when it was over, the Galactic Council no longer existed. In its place, Kira established the Concord of Worlds, a new governing body where every species had an equal voice, where disputes were settled through negotiation rather than violence, where the strong protected the weak instead of exploiting them. Many said it could not last, that old hatreds would resurface and the galaxy would return to its vicious ways. But they did not understand what had changed. They did not understand that a single act of compassion 20 years ago had planted a seed. And that seed had grown into something that could reshape the universe on the day the Concord was formally established. Kira made one more demand. She insisted on a monument, to be placed in the central plaza of the Council's former capital, where delegates from every world would see it every day. The monument showed a human soldier in battered armor, holding a small alien child against his chest. And the expression on the soldier's face was not one of fear or hatred, but of determination and love. The plaque beneath it read, "He chose compassion when hatred was expected." From that choice, an empire learned mercy and the galaxy learned respect. Marcus Cole, now in his 70s with more gray than brown in his hair and more scars than he could count, stood at the unveiling ceremony with his daughter, the matriarch, beside him. The crowd was vast. Representatives from species that had spent millennia at war, now standing together in peace. And they watched in silence as the cloth fell away and the monument was revealed. Kira gave a speech about hope and change and the power of small kindnesses to transform the universe. And the crowd cheered so loudly that the sound could be heard in orbit. But Marcus did not give a speech. He just looked up at the statue, at the image of himself as a young man making a choice that had seemed impossible at the time. And then he looked at his daughter, the most powerful ruler in known space, the woman who had conquered empires with mercy and reshaped the galaxy with love. "I am proud of you, kiddo," he said quietly, his voice meant for her ears alone. Kira, who had stood firm before the mockery of ambassadors and the blades of assassins and the fury of her own people, who had waged war with wisdom and built peace with patience, who had become everything the galaxy said she could never be. She looked away so no one could see or cry. They stood together as the sun set over the capital of a new galaxy, a father and daughter who had been hated and mocked and dismissed, who had lost everything and gained more than they ever imagined. And somewhere in the crowd, a young human boy tugged on his mother's sleeve and pointed at the monument, Who was he? The boy asked. His mother smiled and lifted him up so he could see better. He was someone who did the right thing when everyone told him not to, she said. And because of that choice, the whole galaxy changed. The boy nodded solemnly, as if he understood something important. And when his mother put him down, he ran to join other children playing in the plaza. Human and Verkith and Sindari, and a dozen other species mixed together in the careless joy of youth. Marcus watched them play, and he remembered a time when such a sight would have been impossible. And he knew that the price the galaxy had paid for its mockery was not destruction or conquest. It was transformation. The end.